So, what would happen if Loyalist Death Guard invaded Mars during the Heresy? The answer? A right rollicking robotic rumble. That's what. Meet Pete. Pete is a right goodjin. You may know him better as Wardolly Studio, a rather wonderful painter here on YouTube. And he also happens to be one of the linchpins of our wee Heresy community at Crossfire Gaming Club. Pete's story is one that I'm hearing more and more regularly. He was a big Warhammer 40k player, but he'd been quite badly burned by how competitive 40k has become. With constant updates and balance patches, and constantly playing hyper-competitive gotcha lists all the time when all he really wants to do is have some fun, roll some dice and move some figures about. In fact, he admitted to me during one of our earliest Heresy games that reaching out to me and getting into 3rd edition was actually a bit of a hobbying lifeline for him. He'd just become so tired of what Games Workshop have bent and cajoled 40k into being, that he felt like he'd almost lost interest in tabletop gaming altogether. Well, I am eternally glad that Pete decided to give 30k a go, because Pete is a fantastic player and he really gets the spirit of Horus Heresy. He's very into sweeping narrative themes and he's really into the story of the game as opposed to winning or losing. So what does Pete, a man who's looking for a chill break away from the technical horrors of 40k do? He goes full on hard mode and decides to start a Mechanicum army. An army that is the Horus Heresy equivalent of building a nuclear reactor.
The priests of Mars were revened by the heresy just as much as the Impedium, with Kelbor Howe, the reigning Fabricator General, allying himself with the War Master, and his immediate subordinate Fabricator Lucum Zagreus Cain remaining true to his oaths to Terra and the Emperor. And thus the Mechanicum was rent in twain in a schism that would still have an impact 10,000 years later.
Pete saw that and thought, yeah, I'll have me some of that, thank you. I've had the chance to play Pete quite a lot. I ran him through his first intro games into Horus Heresy 3.0, and I've helped him refine his list and refine his playstyle till he gets to a point where he just gets the Mechanicum. They are probably the smallest army you'll find in Horus Heresy, with the fewest bodies to chuck at the enemy. And they rely on a real core of tech priests and magi to keep the army functioning properly. Their strengths are numerable invulnerable saves coupled with incredibly high toughness, really high mental stats, or sometimes just invulnerability to statuses altogether. And of course, the ability to absolutely hammer the foe with some eldritch, terrifying scientific weaponry. Many which come with a tasty side order of statuses to go with that. And when we played most recently, Pete has shown me that he has fine-tuned this playstyle into a finely working mechanism. Just as the Omnissiah intended. After agreeing that our next game would be a 3,000 point game, we both left to build suitably deadly lists. As mentioned, I've played Pete a few times and I wanted to bring something a bit different to this game. Something he hadn't played before and I certainly hadn't tried. And something that would look super cool and super thematic on the tabletop. So, ladies and gentlemen, I give you the Mars Invasion Force. So, kicking the list off with my Crusade primary detachment, starting with my ever faithful Loyalist Commander Davos Gorgoth, the red left hand. He's a Legion Praetor, armed with Paragon Blade, Combi Bolter, and Melta Bombs. Next is his second in command, Centurion Garad, a Legion Cataphracti Centurion, armed with a Power Axe and a Combi Bolter, and I've also given him the prime benefit, Paragon of Battle. Next up, a brand new unit who this whole list is based around, Grave Lord Nito, my new Legion Mortificator. I absolutely love this model. He is a Mortificator in Tartaros Terminator armour, armed with a Volkite Charger, a Corpusant Staff, and Servo Arms. He's also going to unlock a Dreadnought Talon for me later on in the list. And another brand new unit, Consul Hecates, a Master of Signals, armed with a Bolt Pistol and a Command Vox Relay. The Command Vox Relay is meant to be really good and I'm looking forward to trying it out in this game. On to troops choices now, and first of all, Tactical Squad Gamma. A tactical squad armed with bolters, a Vexilla and a Nuncio Vox. Their sergeant comes with an Alchem Caster and a Power Sword. And I'm going to be mounting these guys in a Rhino armed with a Havoc Launcher, Dozer Blades, a Combi Bolter and a Hunter Killer Missile. And I'm also going to give this squad a prime benefit of Combat Veterans. My second tactical squad, Squad Iota, is armed very similarly to the first, with a Vexilla, a Nuncio Vox and bolters. The sergeant this time comes with a Plasma Pistol and a Power Sword, and they'll also be mounted in a Rhino, but this time with a Dozer Blade and also a Pinto mounted multi-melta for any armour that comes our way.
My final troops choice is Tactical Squad Theta, a motor bare-bone squad, also with bolters, Vexilla and Nuncio Vox, but this time the sergeant just comes with a bolt pistol and a chainsword. I will mount these guys also in a Rhino, this time armed with a heavy flamer, a dozer blade and a hunter killer missile. The final unit from my Crusade Primary Detachment is Der Malwerf, a Legion Termite, armed with melta cutters and 2 heavy flamers. I'm planning on putting a plasma squad in these guys to launch a turn 2 surprise against the Mechanicum. The first of my auxiliary detachments will be an Armoured Fist for my now standard twin Land Raider assault. My first choice is Curse You All Men, a Land Raider carrier with twin las cannon sponsons, a twin heavy flamer and a pinto mounted heavy flamer. My second Land Raider is For Whom the Bell Tolls, another Land Raider carrier, this time armed with a twin las cannon sponson, twin las cannons and a pinto mounted multi-melta. Going into the Land Raiders are a couple of shock assault choices, the first being the Tall Grasses, a Grave Warden Terminator squad. They're 5-man strong, with cataphracti armour, assault grenade launchers, and they are all armed with chain fists. My second Terminator squad is Squad Vanitas, this time a Tartaros Siege Terminator squad. They are all armed with Reaper autocannons and chain fists, and the sergeant comes with a combi bolter and a power scythe. I'm also going to be taking a Tactical Support Auxiliary Detachment just for one squad, Heavy Support Squad Imrion, a Heavy Support Squad armed with plasma cannons and a Nuncio Vox. I plan on putting these guys into the Termite. And my final detachment is the detachment I pretty much built this whole list around, a Dreadnought Talon unlocked by Gravelord Nito. It features 3 Contemptor Dreadnoughts, the first being Contemptor Bahat, who is armed with a Gravis Plasma Cannon, a Havoc Launcher and a Gravis Power Fist with a Heavy Flamer. My second Contemptor is Contemptor Ankara, a Close Combat Dread, armed with paired Gravis Power Fists with Melta Guns. And my final Contemptor, and voted most likely to suffer from new model syndrome, is Contemptor Thubos, my ranged Contemptor. He is armed with twin las cannons and a conversion beam cannon.
So we reached the day of the game, and just as I thought, Pete had leaned really hard into the automata side of the Mechanicum. Ursarax, Dalaxi, Castellax, Domitar, Vorax, Volturax, oh my! And of course 2 mighty Thanatar siege engines. Pete was going heavy duty with this list. I knew that I would have both speed and scoring power on my side, but Pete's army would be an outrageously tough nut to crack, and the amount of status causing weapons on his side was troubling to say the least, and my own status causing weapons such as Phosphex or Heavy Flamers would find little purchase among the mechanised menaces that were being hurled towards me.
Our battlefield was an abandoned research post out in the Martian desert, raised high off the Red Plateau to try and avoid the all-consuming sands. We agreed that all terrain would be medium. It blocks line of sight if it's more than 3 inches thick, and units can move over and under it with a 2-inch penalty. There's no dangerous terrain, and all cover would confer a 5+ cover save. Our deployment would be Vanguard Strike. We'd be deploying diagonally, putting quite a distance between us in turn 1. Pete decided to go with the more urbanised side of the field, so I would have the tall platform walls as cover in my turn 1. Our mission would be Bitter Endurance from the Liber Objectum. 6 objectives in no man's land, all worth 2 points each. However, we agreed we just wanted a chill game with as little moving parts as possible, so we decided to ignore the Bitter Endurance special rule that would remove objectives. The secondaries of Slay the Warlord and Last Man Standing were active for 2 points each, and First Strike would be worth a weighty 3 points. We'd play for 4 turns, and reserves were a go. Pete lost the initial roll-off and so deployed first. His army deployed in a long line right at his deployment edge. The core of his army were the 2 Thanatar engines and a mighty Moirax Armiger armed with a Sea Beamer, all 3 capable of wreaking havoc from very long distances. Pete also peppered his various Magi and Tech Priests with his numerous automata squads, making sure the dim-witted machines would keep moving and obey orders. He also went a bit spicy and put both units of Dalaxi and his single Ursarax assault squad into reserves, intent on deep striking them in where most needed from turn 2 onward. It was a very strong looking army with no obvious weaknesses. In response, I knew I'd need to weather the storm of fire in turn 1 and set all my forces up behind the safety of the platforms, blocking line of sight. My Praetor and Centurion went with the Grave Wardens in one Land Raider, while my Mortificator went with the Siege Terminators in the other. My Master of Signals and 2 of the Dreadnoughts hid themselves behind a tall building, while Ankara, my Close Combat Dread, plonked himself down front and centre. I put my Plasma Cannons into the Termite, intent on springing my own Deep Strike surprise as well.
With the battle lines drawn, we shook hands, wished each other a good game, and with that, the Death Guard went to war with the Dark Mechanicum on the surface of Mars. This was going to be epic.
Turn 1 saw Pete's cybernetic servants pour over the copper dunes towards the objectives, using the cover to get into advantageous positions. The Domitars and Vulturax claimed one objective, while a Castellax Maniple led by a Tech Priest claimed another. His Secutors led another Maniple of Castellax towards the eastern objective, while their brothers in the Destructor Coven marched ahead of the Moirax and Vorax towards the centre. With little insight behind the platforms and buildings on the other side of the battlefield, Pete's one bit of shooting was the mighty Thanatar, who blasted a ball of white-hot plasma over the battlefield into the Death Guard's lines. However, its fury splashed harmlessly off the tough armour of the Land Raiders. With no assaults being possible and his army set up for big moves in turn 2, Pete opened the game with a score of 7 points. My turn 1 also saw me manoeuvring my army into position to try and make big gains in the second turn, with a Rhino and Land Raider speeding westward while the rest of the army pushed up into the east. Contemptor Ankara smashed through the cover of the platforms, rushing forward, hoping to draw the majority of the Mechanicum's fire, while his brother Dreadnoughts marched up to draw lines of fire next turn. A tactical squad stormed from the Rhino to claim an objective, being sure to remain in the shadow of the vehicle in case of sudden assault. What few units they could see peppered the Mechanicum with some weathering fire, but no major damage was caused. My turn 1 ended with me scoring 4.
We both knew in our heart of hearts that turn 2 is where things were going to get mental.
With a screech of retro thrusters, a squad of Thalaxi fell from the sky and landed on the high-rise in my deployment zone, the elite cyborgs looking to hit the Death Guard in their backs. Contemptor Bahat reacted with his Havoc Launcher and Plasma Cannon, hosing the mechanised warriors with explosive interceptor fire, killing 2 of them instantly. The rest of the Mechanicum, seeing their comrades land, surged forward. The Myrmidons on the east flank captured the objective there, while the Vulturax swept forward on its anti-grav engines intent on the tactical squad ahead. However, the Tacticals saw the incoming Vorax Hunter-Killers charging out of the dunes and fell back into their Rhino, shouting for the pilot to seal the hull and keep the deadly machines out. The Thalaxi fired their weapons at the Death Guard forces below but caused no damage, while the other Mechanicum machines drew targeting beams onto the Contemptor and Rhino, unleashing a wall of exotic energies and explosives, detonating the Dreadnought instantly and fouling the tracks of the Rhino, pinning it. The Vorax let out a howl of binoric rage as they leapt at the Rhino, slashing and ripping with their energised talons. The crew inside were kept safe by the Rhino's hull armour, but were severely shaken, becoming stunned by the attack. Battle had been joined at last, and Pete scored a further 8 points, bringing him up to 15. The Death Guard counter-assault came as Consul Hegetes sent a subsonic signal underground, summoning a termite to burst from the ground deep in the Mechanicum lines, churning the Martian soil into thick, pasty mud. The Land Raiders ground towards the Mechanicum war machines while the Contemptors also pushed forward. Consul Hegetes radioed to Contemptor Bahat, ordering him to remove the Myrmidons from the field ahead, granting the Dreadnought Vanguard 1 for the duration of the turn. Death Guard Astartes poured from their vehicles, ready to bring the fury of the Legion down upon the Martians. Tactical squads ran from their Rhinos, claiming 2 objectives, while the heavy plasma squad took aim and fired their weapons at the Archmagos, one exploding as his weapon overheated. The Vulturax, seeing the furious Grave Wardens, tried to peel away, its buzzing engines pulling it as far as it could as crack grenades detonated around it. Fire erupted from the Death Guard, scoring deep gouges on the Moirax and Reductor cults. The Death Guard hurled explosives and laser death at the Mechanicum lines, scoring several wounds across the larger machines but scoring no meaningful kills other than one of the Domitars. The Plasma Storm meanwhile fizzled and died around the Archmagos as his ancient shielding warded away the killing heat with eldritch science. The 2 Terminator squads and Contemptor Bahat charged forward, chain fists whirring and power fists sparking as they crashed into the Mechanicum machines. Gravelord Nito tore a Reductor cultist in half with his servo tentacles, while his Terminators pulled down another, causing the normally stalwart priest to flee in panic. Contemptor Bahat crushed 2 of the Secutori with his charge, causing their comrades to also flee, scoring the Dreadnought a Vanguard point and leaving the objective in his possession. The Praetor and his Grave Wardens, however, failed to kill the Vulturax, who escaped the battle with a single wound remaining. The Death Guard counter-assault had netted me a huge 10 points, but I was still trailing Pete by a point as we headed into turn 3. Disaster struck at the start of Pete's turn 3 as there was a breakdown in communication between the Martian commanders and the Thalaxi and Ursarax as he failed both reserves roll for each of the squads, meaning at least one of them would not be seeing the game at all. To compensate, however, his Archmagos commanded his underlings to repair the damage caused by the Death Guard, with numerous Magi and Tech Priests moving to obey. All the damage I had caused to his Moirax and Vulturax were healed immediately by the red-robed adepts.
Big tip if you find yourself fighting the Mechanicum. Focus fire. Aim to kill what you shoot in one turn, because their capacity to heal units using Battlesmith is tremendous. That really small number of bodies that I mentioned isn't a problem if you just can't get rid of the bodies. Suddenly having a full health and very angry Moirax again in the centre of the field was a daunting proposition for me.
The Myrmidons continue to fall back as the Moirax and Castellax pushed forward to plug the gap left by their fleeing kin. The Mechanicum fire was devastating, with lasers, arc lightning and explosives raining down into the Death Guard. Several Terminators were wiped out by Last and C-beam fire, causing both squads to rout, while the Vulturax rained shells down on the Plasma squad. The squad moved to return fire, but 4 of them lost their lives as their plasma cannons overloaded and detonated. When the smoke cleared, the Sergeant stood alone, phaged and coughing blood, but amazingly still standing. The assault phase was also devastating, as the giant Thanatar siege automata smashed into the Termite, its enormous power fists tearing the machine in half with a colossal explosion. Meanwhile, the Vorax, unable to move past the Rhino, turned and assaulted the other tactical squad, ripping and shredding the Marines into ribbons. The Marines routed and fled at the assault, but the Vorax caught them easily, ensuring the Marines would be wiped out next turn. Finally, the Myrmidon Destructors rallied and returned to the battle, their advanced heavy weapons scanning for new targets. Their cousins to the east hit the board edge and also rallied, but were now suppressed and massively out of position. By routing both my elite units and taking out one of my line units, Pete had done a huge amount of damage. He scored a further 7 points, bringing his total to 22.
Not gonna lie, I was sweating at this point. With many of my key units routed and with Pete constantly healing his units, I was in a really tight spot. The next 2 turns would be crucial if I was to stand a chance.
My Master of Signals radioed to curse you all men, giving the venerable machine Vanguard 1 in the hope of driving the Magos and Domitar off the west objective. My remaining Rhinos speared forward, with the pinned vehicle managing to repair itself in the previous turn. The empty Rhinos moved to block line of sight and box the Mechanicum in, while the Eastern Rhino deployed my final tactical squad to claim the objective. My commanders roared at their troops to rally, but the Terminators of both squads fled back to their deployment zones. My C-beam Contemptor drew a bead on the Thalaxi on the roof of the high-rise and rained laser death upon them. The cyborgs returned fire, killing the machine, but losing another 2 of their number and routing. Curse You All Men unleashed its last cannons at the Domitar, punching clean through its chassis and killing the unit outright. The attached Magos, however, amazingly held his nerve, but now stood alone on the objective. Its brother Landraider hosed the Moirax, but again failed to kill the towering war machine. Contemptor Bahat, seeing the Myrmidons rally, rained plasma and havoc shells on them, killing another and stunning the unit. Then, with a deep bellow from his Vox unit, Bahat charged into the Castellax heading for the east objective. Its power fist caved into the cortex of the lead robot, breaching its power core and causing the machine to explode violently. The expanding ball of plasma fire claimed several tactical marines, wounded the Tech Priest and Myrmidons, and severely damaged its remaining cousin. The Contemptor, however, stood tall above the flames with a single wound remaining. Seeing the ancient machines massacre, the Tech Priest panicked and routed and commanded its charge to retreat. The Contemptor took a few paces forward, placing itself in a position to defend the objective, but far away from its brothers in case it too detonated. The tacticals in the centre were brutally hacked apart by the pursuing Vorax, who stalked towards the remaining tactical squad with their mechanical limbs covered in Astartes blood. Thankfully, both my Terminator units rallied and turned to face the Mechanicum once more, but their temporary absence had been keenly felt already. With 2 objectives held by line units, I scored 8, bringing my score to 22 also.
We were neck and neck with 1 turn to go, and Pete's army was still incredibly strong. I felt like I had killed nothing on his side of the field. I'd need a whole lot of luck in the last turn if I was to pull off a win.
From the dark Martian skies fell 6 flaming figures as Pete's remaining Thalaxi finally deep struck in, landing slap bang on the central objective, aiming their lightning guns at the Terminators. The Vulturax flew to the west objective and joined up with the Magos, giving the ancient priest some much needed protection. Meanwhile, the Myrmidons marched forward, keen to avenge themselves upon the Death Guard. Pete's routed units continue to flee however, his Castellax hitting the board edge and fleeing completely.
What happened next was literally unbelievable, and it was one of the key reasons I love Horus Heresy so much.
The Tech Priests had repaired the Moirax once more, but must have missed a critical subsystem somewhere deep in the ancient Knight suit. It charged up its conversion beam cannon and fired a beam of energy at the Land Raider in the centre. However, its aim went awry and the bolt bounced from the tank's hull and rebounded into the Thalaxi, who were suddenly enveloped in killing energy. 3 of them fell, instantly vaporised. The Land Raider meanwhile returned fire upon the Armiger, its last cannons and multi-melta all hitting dead centre on the towering battlesuit. With a flash of white death, the Moirax detonated, flames billowing outward and enveloping its allies in a ball of nuclear flame. 2 Tech Priests were instantly slain, his Archmagos suffered severe burns and another Myrmidon slumped over dead. Suddenly, where the Moirax had stood was now a gaping, smoking crater in Pete's previously unassailable line.
This was huge and such a thematic bit of storytelling. The weird science of the Dark Mechanicum suddenly failing them at the last key moment, and presenting a chance for victory from a beleaguered Loyalist Death Guard.
The devastation had clearly impacted the Mechanicum's noospheric communication because their fire was now sporadic and ineffective. Pete hurled as much as he could at the Western Rhino, desperate to remove it so his Vorax could hit my tacticals, but the light vehicle survived every assault. The Thanatar dropped a ball of plasma from the sky in a bid to rout the other tacticals, but the shot went wide and splashed onto the Contemptor instead, who weathered the plasma storm unharmed and deeply confused. The Vorax hurled themselves at the Rhino in machine anger, but again failed to cripple the personnel carrier, who protected its charges admirably. With the arrival of his Thalaxi, Pete had tallied a final score of 31 points, but with the freak destruction of his Moirax, he was now in very real danger, with me having a turn left.
I needed 10 points if I was to clinch the win, and I also needed to make sure that Pete had less units than me so he couldn't score last man standing.
My Master of Signals radioed the Mortificator and ordered him to break off from combat and claim the objective on the platform, giving him line 1. I moved my Praetor and Grave Wardens to assault the remaining Magos, and for whom the bell tolls rolled into the gap left by the Moirax. It fired every weapon into the Archmagos, the last cannons and multi-melta riddling the cybernetic lord with burning holes. He collapsed, utterly destroyed, and scored me slay the warlord. Meanwhile, Davos and his Terminators fired into the Magos supporting the second Land Raider, before scoring a long charge and hurtling in, roaring the Emperor's name. He raised his Paragon Blade and hacked the Martian priest down, while his bodyguard finally brought down the Vulturax. The Grave Wardens netted another Vanguard kill and claimed the western objective. With the enemy commander dead and 4 objectives claimed, I scored a massive 15 points in my last turn, plus a further 4 for both Slay the Warlord and Last Man Standing, meaning my final score was 41.
The Mechanicum machines slumped to the ground as their commanders fled the field, leaving clouds of radiation and smoking fires in their wake. The Death Guard were bloodied and mourned the cost that this mission had inflicted upon them, but they had seized victory. The game ended 31-41, a truly epic, thematic and nail-biting clash up to the very end. An absolutely insane game, which despite the loss I think really highlights the core strengths of the Mechanicum. But I also think this battle shows how to combat them quite effectively as well. Focus fire and move quickly around them. I did make a few big mistakes this game. My Plasma Cannon Deep Strike turned out to be a bit of a damp squib. God, all the ones! 2 of my beautiful dreads made very little impact on the game, and I think I could have picked my targets better and made sure the big hitters died in a single turn. But if I did that, we would not have gotten the spectacular turn 4 Moirax explosion, which was absolutely fantastic. So you know, swings and roundabouts. But there were some real Marines of the match for me as well. My Land Raiders continue to be absolute workhorses, never letting me down in any game. While my Plasma Dread Contemptor Bahat, he held down an entire half of the field himself for 2 turns. But Hegetes, my Master of Signals, my man, how useful was he? Being able to grant any unit line or vanguard and make your reserve roll easier and allow you to unlock another detachment all for about 100 points, bargain! I will definitely be bringing him in future games. I should say, Pete played an absolute blinder though. He picked his targets really well and he kept his line really entrenched, just presenting a wall of iron that I couldn't break. In fact, if I'm honest, Pete never put a foot wrong the entire game. I genuinely think if it wasn't for his unlucky deep strike roll in turn 3 and of course the Moirax explosion, Pete could have took that game. Which makes this old Heresy man so proud. But you know, that's why we play Heresy. Those big, crazy, you had to have been there moments. I know a lot of people who are more competitively minded maybe don't like those random elements that Heresy has maintained, but for me, they're big storytelling moments which are always fantastic when they happen. Pete is a fantastic addition to our community, and I look forward to fighting his Mechanicum for a long, long time to come. Horus Heresy is great because of opponents like Pete, and because sometimes a single exploding Moirax is all that stands between you and victory. Thanks for watching.